Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where I am absolutely thrilled that the Stark Expo is returning to the MCU, or at least the Sony corner of it, and therefore I am of course referring to Spider-Man Homecoming. Yes, that's currently filming in the New York City area, and some pics were snapped of the production, and they got Tony Stark's personalized license plate, but also a poster for the Stark Expo with two topics of discussion, or at least promotion: Stark Acceleration and World Realities. Guest starring Doctor Strange to give a talk. But I'm as happy as if I could actually go to this myself. And in fact, I think that Marvel, therefore Kevin Feige, because he obviously makes all the decisions there and does a good job, I feel that he should consider actually holding a Stark Expo, or at least maybe he should have back in the day. And that's how old the MCU is, that it can have a back in the day, because at one point it was about all things Stark, and I'm still on Team Stark, but I have to admit that Team Captain America has far more members, so maybe he could have a convention? You know, I don't know. I'm pretty sure that the governments of the world would show up and arrest him because he's still a fugitive, as we know, and the Russo brothers have confirmed Civil War ain't over. But anyway, while I can't go to the Stark Expo, I think the awesome thing is that clearly Peter Parker can and will. And I'm very excited. You know, I loved the Stark Expo and Iron Man 2. I thought it was such a great idea. I thought it fit perfectly within the world building of, Stark Enterprises. And I liked it because, of course, it plays into Comic-Con and other industry events, like E3, etc. But to have Peter Parker go, I think, is really, really smart. And to see the Stark Expo from that perspective, I think it's going to also be really cool. Like, what would it be to be, we've seen what it's like behind the scenes, but what would it be like to be a guest at the Stark Expo, even if you do have a connection to the guy running it? Although, I would assume that maybe there would be another fight sequence at the Expo, perhaps, because why pay to set that thing up just for like a couple of one-liners and talking scenes, right? You're like, we're going to have a throwdown here, maybe. Maybe they could show off some cool new technology, we'll see. But that would be 2 for 2 for Stark Expos with, attacks breaking out. And I guess that the only thing that Tony Stark could do would be start his own insurance company. But I'm very excited about this, and I think it's very organic. And I think that that's the kind of world building that I really admire. And I was afraid it had gone away, but to bring it back and that Tony's still doing it, I would much rather see him do that than do, talks at MIT as he did in Civil War. I thought that was just a little bit too quick and not particularly compelling. But this, I guess because it's, again, the idea that someday perhaps I could go, that you could go to a Stark Expo. And maybe if Tony Stark returns to his top popularity once more, we will get to go. But I'm excited to see Peter Parker attend. So I'm curious, what do you think of Stark Expo? Are you really so against Tony Stark that you're not at all interested in what Robert Downey Jr. does in these movies anymore? Or are you at least excited to see Peter Parker go to Stark Expo? And would you want to go to a Stark Expo in real life? They kind of have that as the narrative for some of the Iron Man displays at Disneyland in California. And so I would love, and I know that they're building like a Stark Expo center with the new Iron Man ride in Asia. So maybe we'll get to go to a Stark Expo via the theme parks, although never in Orlando, because of course they have that deal with Universal's Islands of Adventures. Darn it! All right, us East Coasters, but I go out to the West Coast, so I'll just have to make a stop at Disneyland if they ever build a ride there. But anyway, the second story of the day is about Justin Lin. Speaking about rides and toys, and he's going to be teaming up with Mattel and Legendary for a Hot Wheels movie. And we're going to talk about Justin Lin in just a second, but I think the real headline here is that Mattel is aggressively trying to get into the movie business. They're like, damn, look at how much money Hasbro's making. I mean, Hasbro's not getting a lot of respect with their movies because, Transformers, G.I. Joe, but they make a lot of money, particularly the Transformers movies. They make that's a $1 billion franchise. So Mattel's like, we've got good brands. Let's get in on this. So far, not so good. Max Steel is their next big movie hitting screens, but they're also trying to actively do Masters of the Universe. Barbie is supposed to come out sometime soon, and also Monster High, which is also set up at Universal where Hot Wheels would be, because Legendary, of course, has a distribution deal with them. I think Monster High, I think all those properties sound pretty good except for Max Steel. But a Hot Wheels movie? I don't know. Now, as for hiring Justin Lin, it is both a brilliant and horrible idea. It's brilliant because, of course, he's the one who built the Fast and Furious franchise, or helped build the Fast and Furious franchise into what it is today, coming on board with the third film and staying all the way up until Fast 6 before he let James Wan sit in the driver's seat. Let's use the right imagery here. Or continue with the metaphor. But if I were Universal and Vin Diesel, who are behind the Fast and Furious franchise, I guess Hot Wheels will also maybe be at Universal, but would it? Legendary, I think that Legendary could potentially take the picture somewhere else. I think Universal has the right of first refusal, but it seems like a direct competitor with that brand. I guess at least if I were Universal, I'd want to keep everything in-house. I'd be like, it's a direct competitor, and I'm kind of annoyed you hired my boy to do it, Justin Lin. It's a little too close to home, but I'd rather I have the money than someone else. So we'll see what studio it ends up with. But I think it's a potentially horrible idea because of Star Trek Beyond. Now, Star Trek Beyond was solidly reviewed. Some people liked it, and to be perfectly fair, and it actually did pretty well at the box office, which is weird. People complain about Star Trek movies, but they make serious bank still. Like this isn't as good as the first two. It's at 336 million worldwide for Star Trek Beyond, but it's really close to the first, the Star Trek reboot in 2009, or alternate timeline with 380, which had 385, and then the most successful Star Trek movie of all time is Star Trek Into Darkness with 467. Although that was also voted the worst Star Trek movie of all time. So it's the most successful and the worst according to the fans. But maybe I think the strength of that came off of how good the first, the 2009 Star Trek was. So I can understand Paramount being like, I don't know what to do with this. I'm making money, but people are complaining. It's a little bit like Transformers, right? But a Hot Wheels movie, let's hope it turns out better than Monster Trucks, which of course was recently in the headlines for already losing $150 million before it even hits theaters. So I'm interested to know if you'd want to see a Hot Wheels movie at all. Do you think Mattel can get into the space and compete with Hasbro and maybe get a little bit of artistic credibility as well? What do you think of Justin Lin being hired for the gig? Now, speaking of another Lin, I want to talk about Lin-Manuel Miranda, who I'm really starting to wonder, is he truly famous or is he a media darling? I mean, he certainly has a very strong cult fan base, but I think that this might be a situation where the media has blown him up to appear more popular than he actually is. And this reminds me a little bit of Benedict Cumberbatch, who also has struggled with mainstream audiences despite an intense cult fandom. But Benedict Cumberbatch benefits from the fact that he has very strong internet presence, and that his fan base is really big on social media. So they can blow up stuff that he's associated with in that space, even if it doesn't do particularly well at the actual box office, right? I mean, I think the only really truly successful thing he's associated with, The Imitation Game obviously was nominated for a lot of Oscars, but I think Sherlock is the only thing that he's been in which is truly successful. And even then, I think it's more successful in the UK than it is in the United States. I think if you were to ask the type of moviegoer who only goes once a month, if that, they're probably not that familiar with Cumberbatch even in that role. So, but Lin-Manuel Miranda, I feel that his fans, largely coming from the musical theater arena, aren't big on social media and have a hard time getting him trending. Now, Idina Menzel was very big in musical theater, and I think that helped propel Frozen. But I think what did the real heavy lifting on Frozen, of course, was the music, and particularly that song, and also what Elsa is supposed to represent, or at least represents to many fans. And Disney lets it represent it. They don't get involved. They don't say, well, this is what we meant her to represent. They're like, do whatever you want with the character as long as you're happy. So maybe Lin-Manuel Miranda, maybe this fandom will materialize eventually. But right now, it's not doing so well. For instance, I was really struck yesterday by how the announcement of a live-action Lion King trended on Twitter. It was a huge deal. But a couple of weeks earlier, when it was announced that Lin-Manuel Miranda was taking a serious creative hand in the development of a live-action Little Mermaid movie, both, neither Lion King or Little Mermaid live-action movies have release dates. They're not at all concrete. They're extremely amorphous. But everybody was really excited about Jon Favreau's The Lion King, and no one talked about Lin-Manuel's Little Mermaid. It was quite surprising when no one talked about Little Mermaid, and it was even more surprising to see that they would talk about another live-action adaptation if it was something they felt was legitimately exciting, which they obviously didn't feel was the case with the Lin-Manuel Miranda news. Also, I would say there's a real lack of buzz about him being involved in the Moana soundtrack. If I were Disney, I'd be I'm really heavily investing in Lin-Manuel. am I wasting my money? But anyway, he has a couple of opportunities coming up to try and, I think, expand his footprint, so to speak. He's going to be hosting Saturday Night Live after Margot Robbie, so that's a pretty big deal. We'll see if that exposes him to some new fans. And also, he's going to be, of course, in Mary Poppins Returns, and he's about to leave to actually shoot that, so it's interesting to hear that that's going into production already. But I think what's also very commendable is that Lin-Manuel Miranda is really big into charity work. It's very important to him, which is quite admirable, and I would hope that that would get him some publicity. And I wanted to talk about that because I got a press release yesterday that he is going to do a fundraising event at the United Palace Theater in Washington Heights. You know, he did, of course, that famous Broadway musical In the Heights, which is going to get turned into a movie. And the United Palace Theater is an old movie house there that's trying to be refurbished. And so far, they've been able to afford a new projector. So he's going to introduce a screening of Mary Poppins. Nice bit of synergy there at the United Palace Theater coming up to kick off a fundraising campaign for the United Palace Theater to earn $300,000 to complete the upgrades for a new sound system and some other work that needs to be done. I think that's very commendable, and he has said he has wonderful memories of going to the United Palace Theater during its heyday, and it would be wonderful to preserve these movie houses so they don't go the way of the Ziegfeld. But I'm curious, are you a Lin-Manuel Miranda fan? He's of course of Hamilton fame. It just occurred to me that some people might not know that. Are you a Lin-Manuel? I mean, if you watch the show regularly, you know. But I mean, are you a Lin-Manuel Miranda fan? Are you familiar with his work? If you're not a fan, what's keeping you from jumping on the bandwagon? I wouldn't say I'm like a hardcore Lin-Manuel Miranda fan, but I'm curious to see. I guess I'm really curious. You know, a lot of people are betting on him, and I'm curious to see if he actually materializes. And, you know, let's give it a shot, right? Okay, so let's go to the viewer question of the day, which comes from Liz C. And Liz C says, "Hi, Grace, I have a question. Which version of Green Lantern would you like to see? John Stewart?" Well, Liz actually wrote Smith, but I think she means Stewart because there's no John Smith character in the Green Lantern universe. But she said John Stewart or Hal Jordan. And who do you think the actor should be? Personally, I'm hoping for John Stewart. You know, anybody who really likes the animated Justice League series, and a lot of people do, of course, really gravitate towards John Stewart. But I think that even though we already had Hal Jordan via Ryan Reynolds in the first Green Lantern movie, I think you're going to have Hal Jordan return because that's Jeff Johns' boy, you know, like he has really written a lot of Hal Jordan stories. The only other way I could see it going is that you could go into two other Jeff Johns creations, and that's the New 52 Green Lantern, Simon Baz, who's Middle Eastern, and they worked very hard to try and bring that diversity into the DCEU. Black Adam is also from the same region, but he's a villain, and also they've cast Dwayne Johnson in that role. And then also they've represented the Latino community with Jessica Cruz. They're the two current Green Lanterns. Hal Jordan's going to get his own title, and he's kind of mentoring them. But, you know, there's always a bunch of not Hal Jordan's, Green Lanterns running around the DCEU, particularly after the popularity of Blackest Night. Really fantastic crossover series. But it got me into Green Lantern mythology to some degree, but I didn't stick around. I have not liked the Green Lantern comics probably pretty much ever, actually, to be perfectly honest with you. John Stewart, I think, is in one of the titles currently as well. But I think that while a lot of fans like to see John Stewart as the Green Lantern, I think that Jeff Johns is going to want to either stick with Hal Jordan, the iconic character that he personally loves so much and has such a connection to, and then also maybe then Simon Baz and Jessica Cruz. I would also say that they already have Cyborg, and so I think if they're going to try and go the diversity route, I think that Middle Eastern and Latino is something that's fresh, new, and original. And I would be curious to see if they could actually launch those Green Lanterns successfully. I don't know how they're going to do the Green Lantern movie. I think the Green Lantern mythology is really tough to get into. It's really like insular. It's not really something that can cross over so well with the rest of the DCEU. Like most Green Lantern stories take place in their own situation, dealing with the different factions, the different colors of light and the emotional spectrum. And, you know, rarely are they like, let's all help save the city. I mean, maybe at one point they were, but today the Green Lanterns are all about, like, space exploration. I would say the Green Lanterns, actually, come to think of it, are almost a little bit like Guardians of the Galaxy, in that, you know, their jurisdiction is off the planet Earth. Although Hal Jordan, of course, is supposed to, Earth is in his sector that he overlooked. He's policing his jurisdiction. That's the word. But you know, so maybe a Guardians of the Galaxy approach would be the best way to handle that. And, you know, all that light would sure be pretty, all those different colors of light, right? So, you know, I'd be curious to see if they can really make the Green Lantern property cross over to mainstream moviegoers. I think it would be tough, but I would use Guardians of the Galaxy as my roadmap. I don't know who I would cast. I think it's too early to discuss that, Liz. I appreciate you asking, though, but we don't even know who the Green Lanterns are going to be. But anyway, that's my thoughts on a Green Lantern movie. I'm curious, what do you think? Write your thoughts down below. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for your question, Liz. Write down below what your thoughts are on Liz's question, the top 3 stories of the day, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Actually, I think that morning movie news, I don't know if it's going to happen tomorrow because I'm going to be working really hard to cover the Luke Cage show, which of course debuts at 3 a.m. tonight, Eastern Standard Time. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.